Good hello. Thanks for watching another Sunday case study. I do hope everyone has had a good Christmas. This is my Sunday Christmas case study. It's the 29th of December. I know it's a little bit late in the year for a Christmas one, but it's the best fit. Happy New Year, everyone, by the way, just before I forget, because it'll be too late by the time it actually comes around, which is only in a couple of days. Now, I've taken a few notes before doing this reading. And I've come up with a few really interesting insights. I've had a look online. I found a few pretty decent images here, and I've made a few predictions surrounding Camilla's future. So here she is in her Queenie hat, and here I am in my little Christmas hat. And, I've got her hands here, her left and right hands, the best ones I could find. And I found some really interesting sort of internal and external comparisons here, as well as um, character traits, um, possible kind of views and opinions as well, just through the hands alone, as well as obviously one or two predictions I'm going to make about her future. So stick around for that. That'll be at the end. So as you can see, here is her left hand, here is her right, and I've just put them both together here so we've got a bit more clarity. And I'm going to be looking at both of these images in depth. Now, when I look at the shape of this hand here, in conjunction with the fingers, I see a dynamic hand with a touch of practicality. Notice how the palm is sort of triangular. It's broader at the top as it kind of narrows at the wrist, although Pluto is certainly on the well-developed side. Notice how it's very well pronounced there. The Jupiter mount is certainly higher than the rest of the fingers. Mercury is significantly low set. The thumb is at a fairly sort of sharp angle. It's not all that high on the hand, but the palm, it has a triangular appearance. Mercury is sort of curled in slightly, typical of dynamic hands, as well as Jupiter being high, and the Jupiter finger is quite long as well, certainly longer than Apollo, and you can see that on the right hand as well. So what do I mean by dynamic hand? Well, you can see more specifically on my website if you want to have a read there, but I will kind of summarize they are highly motivated, energized. That's a pretty good way of summing them up. They are ambitious. They're always on the go. They're whirlwinds of movement and energy. They're workaholics, essentially, and they're very prone to adrenal burnout. Their flaws mainly lie in their emotional understanding, their own emotional self-awareness and understanding, as well as emotional articulation. I suppose their emotional awareness is their biggest flaw. And so in relationships, they can often struggle. They are such powerful forces by spirit and personality and nature that they often struggle to find compatibility. Either someone is too overbearing and dominating and emotionally stifling, or they are weak and no good for them. And generally speaking, dynamic hands often find um, issues that are not actually there in their own relationships in order to justify uh, calling it off, essentially. And so they often live very lonely lives. That's the kind of summary of a dynamic hand, but there is an air of practicality about this person as well. So this kind of whirlwind of movement is leavened somewhat by the heavy rigidity, squareness, the thickness, and the right angles that we see in this hand. So that's a really good sign. Now, moving on, the dramatically low set Mercury finger here. Notice how all of the fingers kind of jut out of the hand fairly evenly. Apollo slightly lower set, and then Mercury, it just sort of falls off the end here. The Mercury finger itself is not short, but it is very low set. Now, this is a clear sign of, as I say, emotional inarticulation. It's a sign of insecurity and low confidence, and it's very unfortunate. And the reasons for this can be seen just over here with the Jupiter finger, because notice the curvature of this finger is quite dramatic bend. This is always seen in those who have had overly critical role models when they were in their crucial ego development years. So this has had a permanent effect on her confidence. But notice how the Jupiter finger itself is at an adequate length. So it creates something of a contradiction. And what this really means is it highlights the difference between self-worth and self-belief. So what we see here is someone who has low confidence but has self-belief. It's a strange one, and it creates something of self-sabotage because when this occurs, we know what we're capable of, but we don't want to allow ourselves to have it because we don't feel that we are worthy of it, if that makes sense. It's a really strange one. And because the Jupiter finger is longer than Apollo, it is slightly higher set, and it provides us with this impression that she has very masculine qualities. The Jupiter finger is, after all, a very harbors these very masculine traits, whereas Apollo is far more feminine. It's all about creativity and abundance and giving. These are very feminine traits, and so it's likely that Camilla has inherited far more from her paternal side. As well as that, moving on, the Apollo thing is a really interesting one because it's quite wide at the base. It's quite wide at the tip. It's quite sort of ballooned at the tip. But at its second phalanx, it's sort of pinched in. It's wasted. And what this does is provide someone with now these three things. You can almost sort of provide a picture here um, of these feminine qualities. She's a nitpicker. This wasting of the second phalanx means that she has an eye for critical detail. The um, wide basal phalanx of Apollo shows discriminatory and an eye for uh, visual kind of discriminatory traits. Essentially, she judges based on appearances. She judges a book by its cover somewhat, but also there's a great deal of physical taste there. She has an ability to taste quite physically. She probably is a good cook, essentially, a good, tasting. And the tip of Apollo being ballooned here slightly, I mean, that's probably not a great way of putting it, but it's very well developed. It shows her inherent eye for natural beauty. So she has an eye for detail and also an eye for natural beauty. Those things in conjunction with each other are really strong traits when the strengths of those are harbored. On the more negative side, as I say, she can be narrow in her prejudiced views. Now I say narrow because when we look at the angle of the thumb in conjunction with the narrow space between the heart and the headline, I would say this is a little bit narrow. It's someone who has quite sort of blinkered black and white perception. So not only is she unorthodox, we see a great space here between the life and the headline. She's a tiger woman, very powerful, independent, unconventional, unorthodox thinker. But this way of thinking is a little bit too rigid. And as I've mentioned, there is some rigidity here in this hand, and that's the angle of that thumb here creates a skeptic, essentially. So she has some contradictory kind of values here, and principles because she is, on the one hand, very unconventional, unorthodox, a radical sort of nonconformist thinking, but then on the other, she's very set in those ways. She's not really able to challenge or change her own opinions, her own prejudice, stigmatized kind of points of view. She's a bit of a discriminator. That's the thing I'm getting here. So there are some real strengths. There's some real powerful personality here, but there's also an equal amount flaws as well. And it's not like she can't still um, enhance and work and play to these strengths and avoid these mistakes and these perceptions, this way of thinking. It's never too late. And I feel that the answer towards her increasing understanding and broadening those perceptions and points of view is by broadening her social circle, her social network, because notice the lifeline is very narrow. It's narrow on the right hand as well. So internally and externally, this is quite a reduced kind of way that she's living. Right. And it makes sense. She's, obviously living very much in the public eye. It's very difficult, isn't it, I suppose, to um, live a life where you're socializing and, able to mingle as you might want to. But she doesn't really want to. She's quite happy in her little bubble. And that's actually part of the issue because if she did broaden those horizons, then she would find ways to grow and develop this very narrow point of view. So I mentioned that she has likely inherited more from her father than her mother. Now, I also mentioned that she has likely received over criticism during her developmental years. And it's likely here that this over criticism was from matriarchal figures. So it's possible that she received quite a lot of criticism from her mother or a mother-like role. And as I've already mentioned as well, she is something of a discriminator and a little bit prejudiced as well. So she probably warms more to male company than female and may well resent actually women in society to some degree. And perhaps this is unconscious as well, subconscious. Now, notice that inner Mars is quite well developed here. And that's because it's partly because of this uh, narrow, kind of skeptical way of thinking that she is um, somewhat more argumentative than most. And also, I've already mentioned, that eye for critical detail creates that sort of a nitpicky um, mindset. She splits hairs probably quite often, and so there's an argumentative nature here, and I think she probably rubs people up the wrong way. Now, I have mentioned that she's a tiger woman. The headline and the lifeline. There's a few interesting things I want to point out about these lines here. Now I'm moving on to the chirology now. Tiger women, tiger people are very independent. They are strong forces of nature. They cannot be confined by conventional relationships. So that's quite interesting. Dynamic can struggle in relationships as well. So it's extremely important that Camilla has a lot in common with Charles, and she does have, because they both love nature. They both have an affinity for natural beauty. Now, the Pluto mount being so well developed, I mean, look at it, it's even red. It's almost sort of screaming with activity. And this is a very watery element. It's a very it's an expanse of um, ancestral memory. As well as that, it harbors just so much water that it's strongly connected to the natural world and natural order. And I've also mentioned having an affinity for natural beauty and all things naturally beautiful, and a very sort of discriminatory kind of element. She feels very strongly about how people should live in the natural world, how we should um, treat and respond to our environment. And Charles also has this as well. So they have a lot in common in those ways. Now, tiger people have something of a way about them in that they act before they think. They leap before they think. That's essentially what um, the sign of the tiger means in Tibetan palmistry. It creates something of an unorthodox thinker, an abstract thinker, a radical thinker. It's likely that she has been seen as unrealistic by her peers, scatty even in her methods and her approaches. The way in which she goes about things are seen as unorthodox, her methods. But interestingly, her headline starts very high up on the hand, on her left hand, very high up. And on her right hand, it doesn't start as high at all. And I find that very interesting because the high starting headline, it really shows us someone who is a leader by example, a leader, a natural kind of born leader. People wish to follow in their footsteps and achieve what they achieve. And people kind of warm to them and enjoy being under their authority, if you like. Now, we see it in the left hand, but not The right hand, what does that mean? It means she feels like a leader. It means she feels a sense of authority and that those around her are wishing to follow in her footsteps. She feels um, as though she those around her enjoy her company and enjoy being underneath her, if you like. Now, on her right hand, that's not so prevalent. It's not so practically and environmentally speaking, that's not so much the case. That's what I'm getting here. It's more of a feeling, this feeling of leadership and authority, because essentially she has leadership qualities. Now, I've mentioned Jupiter. The idea of what she's capable of is there, but the worth isn't. And those with a bending Jupiter finger always lean and rely on others in decision making, because Jupiter is or harbors some of those personality traits and skills in decision making, executive decision making. So she requires um, her ego shelters beneath her sense of right and wrong, and she looks towards what the right thing to do is, and relies on likely Charles in terms of um, guidance. And this is because of that crushed ego, because of this overly critical role model when young. So it's quite sad, really, because there are certainly some leadership qualities here, and she does have them. If only she had that self confidence. And again, if she moved outside of those circles, if she behaved more like the tiger that she is and expanded her horizons and leapt outside of the known world and took a few risks, she would likely grow in confidence as well as expand her social network and broaden those horizons. These are all things that she would greatly benefit from. So again, I just want to point out here that this innate kind of unorthodox way about going about things and the way in which she thinks and feels, she feels very separate to in her beliefs and her methods, the way she goes about things, than that of her peers. And I think that actually this is something that she shares and has in common with Charles. I think there's a lot of compatibility here. I haven't yet read Charles's hands on my channel, at least. I don't think I have officially. Done that many now, I'm not even sure. I don't think I have. But I have looked at his hands, certainly, and I have seen a few things here that really tally up in terms of compatibility. So, on that note of her relationship, if we look here, it's undeniably powerful, isn't it? I mean, look at the strength of it. It's not the clearest of images, but you can see it from a distance, and it's really the only one of note. There is something of one here that wasn't marriage, that was, it was love, but it was a very early age. I mean, we're talking maybe even pre-20s. I don't know what that one was about. So long ago, it's not worth mentioning. But this right here is obviously Charles. And you can see at the age of her life that this relationship occurs, because this being the heart line, the further up the hand the relationship begins, the further along in on the course of their life. So this is around about the age of 50, 55, something like that. It's a very kind of vague and arbitrary way of measuring timing relationships in a person's hand. But the strength and the depth of it shows just how now left hand now, so internally, how it affects this person emotionally on a very internal level. She is impacted and um, affected by this relationship on a in a very positive way, and it's love essentially. That's what it's showing me here. The length of it, it's not as long as I'd want it to be. It's at least from this image, which indicates that it's potentially it doesn't feel like it's going to last as long as it should. She wants to be with him for longer, and it also indicates something about the duration of the relationship on quite a realistic level. On the right hand, the relationship line doesn't appear to be as deep, but we can't take too much away from these images because we've got to take into account shadows and the way the hand is being held. But what I can see is that the relationship line is curving down slightly. And what I feel this means is any relationship under the scrutiny of so many eyes, you're going to feel the weight and the burden of how you go about your daily goings on, and just how you live your life and be in that relationship. It's going to weigh down on anyone. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and that is what this is showing us. It's very unfortunate. The positive thing here, the takeaway here, the positive takeaway is that had Camilla had a long ring finger, had this Apollo finger been long, it would show the overthinking in terms of how others see us, because it's reputation and glory and vanity, and she's none of those things. She's not vain. And Charles admires this about her. And I'm making, surmising a little bit here, but I can see it. It makes sense because she doesn't care what other people think. And this is that kind of unorthodox radical thinker, because her peers do, because it makes sense to care when you are in the limelight, when you are aristocracy, when your any one public move could make the difference, and any small thing you say or do could make a big difference in your career, and have these massive knock-on effects. Camilla doesn't really care all that much what other people think, and that is a real strength. And that I expect is something that Charles admires, and is probably how and why they are able to have such a strong uh, and stable union. Having said that, it is still weighing down on her, and as it would anyone. But thankfully, she doesn't care as much about what other people think. If she did, then it would be tremendously difficult. Now, here's a really interesting thing. Look at the fate line, because on the left hand, there's something of two fate lines, and the more powerful one stems from Luna. Now, again, the left hand is internal, so it shows us her feelings and her path that is strongest. And Luna is in the limelight. It is associated with the opposite sex and having an audience. She has a career in limelight, and it's if it weren't for how the influences and um, impacting kind of events and actions of others, then she wouldn't be where she is. And that's kind of what that's showing us. She is reliant in some way on the actions of others. Um, Also, it shows how she wants to influence and impact on others as well. She feels like she's an influence. Again, that coincides with what we see with the headline. She feels like a leader. She feels as though she is influencing and inspiring others. Now, on the right hand, this is a bit different because the fate line is stronger where we see it coming from Neptune. And if we look real close here, this is really interesting. Look at this. The wrist line it's the fate line is attached to the wrist line, and it creates a little triangle at its roots here. Now this a triangle on the wrist line is acquired assets directly linked to her fate. So what this is, quite obviously showing on a very practical, environmental, and physical level, because it's the right hand, is that it was her destiny all along to acquire great wealth and assets through inheritance, through direct connections with family. I just find that absolutely fascinating. You've got a stronger fate line that's linked towards Neptune on the right, so practically things are very different here to how she's affected. Her purpose is shown on her left, on what she thinks and feels in terms of her fate and her destiny, and on her right, we see it on a very practical level, and I love that as an example. Now, look at this. This is really interesting. There's a little curvature of what looks like a travel line. I always find these little horizontal lines coming from Luna and Pluto, a little further down here. This is Pluto. Really fascinating because they're so mysterious. The moon itself has always been mysterious. Lunar, that comes from the word lunatic, madness. It's always been mysterious, isn't it? The moon comes out, everyone acts crazy. We wouldn't have werewolves if it weren't for full moons. And so it's cosmic forces, cosmic influences we have no control over. And Pluto is even more impactful and mysterious. It's even further away. It's something we know even less about. And so I just find these really interesting because this influence here from Luna, this travel line, essentially that's what this is, looks to influence the life at the age of, I would say, 55. And on the left hand, we have a mother line or via mater, and it strikes the lifeline at the age of 55. Now, I don't know all that much about Camilla. I don't know all that much about anyone I read the hands of on these Sunday case studies, to be perfectly honest. But I do a little bit of research. Now, what this shows me is two things. Firstly, on the left hand here, we have something taking away. We have here potentially the loss of mother or father at the age of 55. That's what I'm seeing. That I'm seeing the emotional impact here. It's the left hand. On the right hand, I see something much more positive, and we see something providing. Luna is uh, it's a lot like Pluto, very watery. It quite literally affects the tides. We wouldn't have tides if it weren't for the moon. And so we see Luna affecting by influencing in a productive and positive way. We see an influence of good luck here. And we see that as well at the age of 55. Well, I know that Camilla got married to Charles at about the age of 55. So 55 for her is probably a karmic year. It's a year of both giving and taking away, and that's always a classic sign of a karmic year. Most people's karmic years, or not most people's, but a lot of the time, it occurs at the age of 35, 36, give or take, and it's just so common. 55 is one for her as well, and there is another age in which I believe there will be something taken away from Camilla in her future. Now I'm building up to the prediction here. But before I do, check out Camilla's fate and sun lines at the age of roughly 70, maybe a touch past 70. And you can see here, very faintly, trident branching on the fate line there, trident here on the sun line. And it's occurring at the same time because you can read the sun, you can read the fate and the sun line correspondingly. And so you see, at the same age here, we have this the boughs, the branches of these trees are bearing fruit at this age, and it's a wonderful sign of prosperity. Exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to see on the hand of, uh, aristocracy um, rising to the throne, so to speak. I don't know what age she became queen, but that it's roughly about the age of 70, give or take, that these branches occur on both the fate and the sun line. And I find that just a wonderful sign to see. It's the sort of thing that you see in palmistry books as the most positive thing that you could possibly see on sun and fate lines. So, what do I predict for Camilla? Well, she is what is she, 77, I think? In 7 years' time, at the time of this reading, so she'll be 84. This is where Pluto looks to take away. And you can see the lifeline kind of branching, forking at this time. And that's where um, health begins to deteriorate. So at the age of 84, it's likely that Pluto looks to take away. Now, that's not to say that she's going to die at age 84, but her health begins to deteriorate at this time. So for the next 7 years, I believe she will live very healthy, happy years. And in a previous reading, when I read, this is interesting now, we're going slightly off topic, but it is related. I read the hand of Prince William. And one of my predictions there was that at the age, I think I said at the age of 49, it's possible that he might become king. Well, when Camilla's 84, Prince William will be 89. Can't help but find some um, corroborating circumstantial clue there. Not to say that he couldn't become king before then. She may well, still be queen mother and live a healthy, happy life still, pursuing her role as she does, and despite whatever else might happen, because there is another influence coming from Pluto in between this time. So I was saying about 3 years' time. No, scratch that. Sorry. This is very different. This is actually her becoming queen. There we are. And this is, as I say, age 84. And that's the last major event in her life. So it could be Charles passing away at this time because Pluto looks to take something away at this time. And assets might well be involved, and it might well have a knock-on effect on her mental and then for physical health because that all too often happens. So 84 is likely another karmic year for her. They're not very positive predictions, are they? But I do predict the next 7 years will be very happy and healthy years of her life. And 84, after all, is not a terrible age. And who can say that she hasn't done well for herself? So the real fascinating takeaway for me from this reading is that I believe even more so now than before that Prince William will be King William at the age of 49 in 7 years' time. So that's what, 2031? I mean, I had to pause it there. My maths is terrible. I think that's right. It's probably still wrong. I doubt myself. Terrible at maths. Good with words, not good with maths. Anyway, that's my prediction. Um, Let me know what you think. I found that fascinating in terms of the connection with other people's palms that I've read, and it's just provided another, it's corroborated another, circumstantial clue there, strengthened my overall conclusion as to what might lie ahead in future. I find that fascinating. Now, I do have some other predictions in terms of 2025. But that's for another video. Let me know what you think on this video. Thank you for all your comments recently. You've all been so supportive and lovely, and I can't thank you all enough. It's been a highly eventful and productive year in terms of palmistry for me, and I'm just getting started. I have some events coming up, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to be doing um, some in-person sort of taster readings for people locally. I'm going to be doing, hopefully, Glastonbury this year. I'll be one of the only palmists at the festival. It's very difficult to get in, but Terry is doing his best to work his magic on that front. And I'm really excited about that. I've also been accepted to have my articles published in a magazine. So I'm getting my foot in the door there. So things are happening. So I'm really excited. And I'm going to be changing a few things about on my website. But anyway, I'm boring you all. Let me know uh, how you felt this year has gone in terms of the content that I've been producing on this channel. Let me know what you would like to see more of next year. Let me know what you have learned and what you'd like to learn more about. I'm really interested to receive your feedback and your thoughts, negative included. It's all too often I receive really sort of positive feedback, and I love it. It certainly massages my ego. It makes me feel better. But I also want to know, I need to know when I'm getting things wrong or what I could be doing better. And that helps me grow. It challenges me. I need that. Everyone needs a bit of challenge. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed all the positives of 2024, and I shall see you all in the new year. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year.